I want to start today by dedicating my talk to my late grandmother, Doña Elena, who passed away last March, and also by dedicating this talk to my grandfather, Don Aníbal, who passed away in April of 2020, because without them, let's be honest, I wouldn't be here today. I also want to dedicate my talk to my parents who are in the crowd today for really being the building blocks for the person I've come today. So I wanted to definitely acknowledge them. Which brings me now to my talk. I often struggle with the question, what do you do for a living? I mean, obviously I'm a teacher, but that never really quite captures the entire essence of what my day-to-day experience is like. So, what do I really do for a living? It's my first day as a third grade teacher at St. James the Apostle School in San Antonio, Texas, on the south side. And I'm super excited to start my first ever morning meeting. And for those of you who don't know, morning meeting is actually my favorite part of the day. We get to check in and see how everyone's doing and what's going to happen for the rest of the day. So one of the biggest rules is that we're always including everyone in our circle. And on this very first day, I asked, who is the person who has had the biggest impact in your life? So I look around the circle and I notice one girl starts to close herself off. And thinking about that rule I just mentioned, I had a big cause for concern. We go around the circle and everybody gets to share who's that one person that inspired them. And later on in the day, I see a note on my desk. And it was written by this young girl. And she said, the person who has impacted me most in my life was my mom. Because last year, I witnessed her pass away. At the age of 8, this young girl was already dealing with sadness, feeling lost, and losing perhaps the most important person one can have, your mom. So how can I expect this young girl to come and learn how to multiply, how to write personal narratives, or how to read stories, when the education that she was really seeking was one that was going to help her process loss and process feeling alone? I immediately stopped in my tracks when I read this letter. As a young 22-year-old guy, I had no idea how to make the world make sense for this young 8-year-old. So how do I take the power of writing, the power of reading, and really help this young girl come to fruition or learn to understand her life? I'm reminded now of my experience in the 5th grade. I had a teacher by the name of Mr. Castellano. And for those of us who don't know what the Bronx is like when you're growing up, it can get pretty intense. Obviously, you have some gang activity happening outside of your building, illegal substances being sold outside of your house. So how do I now take that and process it and go to school and try to learn how to conjugate a verb? It's difficult. Mr. Castellano was the first person in my life who said, the world is so much more than the 4-block radius that you currently live in. And at that very moment, I had no idea what he was saying. It took a little bit of growing up to realize that if I had not heard those words, I would have not felt a passion to move from my hometown and find a new home in Texas and come to Atlanta and have the wonderful opportunity to teach young kids. At the age of 8, we decided to turn our one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx into a child care facility. My mom became the neighborhood daycare provider, the neighborhood child care provider for most often single mothers who were trying to go to work but needed a safe space for their children. But before she could actually open up her daycare, she had to write a biography. And in this biography, she had to tell her story. She had to really think back to where she came from and figure out how she got to where she is today. Now, my mom at the time didn't speak English or know how to write English. So as a young kid, I had to work on how to translate a whole biography from Spanish to English. Now, my writing skills at that point weren't really good yet, but I still had to do the job if my mom was going to be able to provide for our family at that time. I don't think she understood the significance of this moment, because for me, this was the first time in my life that I actually learned where I came from. I was born in the Dominican Republic, in a small city called Santiago, but my family is from a town called Valverde-Mau, and there's really not a lot of people that live there. In fact, if you go to the DR, you'll probably never visit that place because we're often going to resorts and trying to go on vacation. But once I really translated this story, I finally understood where I came from, and I was able to unpack a lot of the trauma or a lot of the confusion that I had in my life. For example, why can't I bring my English-speaking friends home? Well, obviously my parents didn't speak English, so it was a challenge where I was feeling embarrassed. But what I'm really trying to say here, folks, is that through the power of writing, through the power of those words, we're really able to place ourselves in a movie. We're able to place ourselves in a photo and study and analyze what are the facets that make you who you are today through the power of words, through the power of writing. My father would always tell me, if you want to become a better reader, then you need to hear yourself reading out loud. So we would take one of the books we were reading in school, and I'd come home, and I would walk around my living room reading Homer's Odyssey, right? And I struggled with that one because I really didn't, how was a kid from the Dominican Republic able to connect with one of the greatest works in our history? But through the practice of literally just reading out loud, I was able to hear my voice and find who I was, find my voice through the journey that is life. My freshman year at Fordham University, I took one of my favorite classes ever. It was called the Philosophy of Aristotle. I vividly remember the days where I would wake up in the morning in our one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx and walk over to the oasis that was Fordham University. And in that class, I discovered probably the most important lesson that I've ever learned. And it's that all men, or all human beings, by nature, desire to know. So as teachers, what are we doing to actually address our students' desire to know, but most importantly, understand the world that is around them? You see, our students seek, they yearn to be heard, just as much as we expect them to listen to our lessons. Our students want to be seen, just as much as we expect them and hold them accountable for looking at what we have on our boards. They want to be understood, just as much as we ask them to understand the concepts that we teach. And our students want to feel loved, just as much as we love what we do. So you see, folks, to answer that question, what do you do for a living, is not just an answer that has a career. It's so much more than that. And that's why I struggle with the question, because how do I actually capture that for the average person? So when I wake up in the morning and decide to go teach and host our fabulous morning meetings, I always ask myself this: am I listening? Am I seeing? Am I loving? Am I bringing joy to the classroom today? Because we won't always remember the concepts we teach in class, but our students will always remember how they felt. And just like Mr. Castellano taught us so many different things, how to parse a sentence, how to conjugate verbs, how to write essays with no mistakes. The most important thing for me, ladies and gentlemen, was to remember that the world that we live in is so much greater than our immediate surroundings. And if we're able to plant those seeds in our students every single day, then we are truly doing what it takes to form young minds. We are truly taking into account the needs of our students. We are truly modeling effective listening, empathy, courage, joy. But it starts with the questions we ask ourselves. It starts with the reflection that you are able to provide for yourself. It starts with you, ladies and gentlemen, and it starts with me, right? So as we move forward and we interact with our children, I always want us to remember these things, because it is with the power of our words that we're able to transform lives. It's with the power of the things we say and the words that we listen to that we're able to effectively take material that we teach and build connections with our students. So I'll leave you with this today, ladies and gentlemen. Every single day, I teach 21 students. But what they don't always realize is that they're actually teaching me. They're teaching me how to navigate my emotions in the face of difficult assignments. They're teaching me how to get along with each other, even when you don't want to respect that other person. They're teaching me how to share at lunch, even when I didn't have that much food to share in the first place. And most of all, friends, they're teaching me to always leave a lasting impact. And what's important is not always the content of our teaching, but more so the relationships and the connections that we build every single day with our students. So I want to thank Juhi and Sarah Claire, because in my first full year as a lead teacher at Pace, ladies, you showed not only how smart you are, but how dedicated you are to improving every single day. And it is by listening to y'all that I was able to learn the power of words. So thank you. The world is your oyster, and you will accomplish all of your dreams. And never forget that. And to my parents, thank you for always teaching me that you always need to remember where you come from and where you're going in order to be someone. And lastly, I want to thank my grandfather, who you guys just saw. for always telling me, siempre pa'lante y nunca para atrás, always forward and never back. Because if we think too much about our past, then it becomes a little bit more difficult to move forward. But overall, friends, the power of words is such that without listening to them, we won't understand where they're coming from. So as you interact with children in your lives, and even with your fellow adults, I ask that we're all better listeners. I ask that we get just a little bit better at empathizing with each other so that we can build connections with each other. Because, my friends, the power of words brings us together. Thank you.